very turbulent point in our history. The threat of a global thermonuclear war between the United States and Russia has brought us closer to doomsday than ever before. As the existence of humanity now hangs in the balance, what's needed now more than ever is people standing up and declaring independence from the forces that choose to sink us to our demise.
To stand up against the pessimism that reeks in our culture, that plagues the minds of people, that has destroyed our society and our humanity. What's needed now more than ever is to regain the ability to think for ourselves once again. Instead of being divided between two opposing camps, both of which are equally wrong and totally inconsistent with what is really truthful, we seek to go outside those limits and engage in a process of dialogue with various minded people in politics, art, culture, and other subjects.
We do not believe in talking to people who share the same points of view as us, but with people that are sincere and have something productive to say on the current state of affairs in the world. And this can be anybody.
Today, we declare independence from the torchbearers and break our chains to seek out and find and talk with those who are also unafraid.
We declare independence from the tyranny of those who think they can control our thoughts and can force us to choose between what they present to us like shadows in a cave. That's why we are declaring independence.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of Declaring Independence. This is episode number 6. Not number 5 like the thumbnail says, number 6. We're going to get our thumbnails in order soon. It's kind of my fault and Kynan's fault.
No, it wasn't my fault. I made the thumbnail.
It's more Kynan's fault than my fault, but we'll get that fixed. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to dilly-dally anymore. I'm going to bring in our next guest, who I'm super, super duper excited for. She sent me her bio. She doesn't need any introduction. Everyone knows her. Lori Spencer. Lori.
Oh, hi, Jose.
Hi.
Hello,
Thank you
guys.
Thanks for coming on. I know we wanted to do this for a while.
Yes, we have.
And I'm glad we finally got it to work.
Well, you had to start a podcast first.
Yeah, also true. And then be consistent with it. That was the other thing. It's a lot more work than I thought it was. Trying to be an organizer and an activist while also trying to run a podcast is actually a lot more strenuous than I thought it would be. But
yeah, I hear you. I just started a new podcast too, and I think I've bitten off more than I can chew. It's a lot of work.
You got a lot of fans here. This Funky Lollipop.
Funky Lollipop. What's up?
Yeah.
Good to see you.
So also just one quick thing too for our YouTube audience. We are $7 away from being able to check out our first paycheck on YouTube, because you know how you have like $100 threshold.
You made it to $100. All right.
So once you do that, you can start actually checking out. So we're $7 away from that. So
that's awesome.
Any people want to help us out?
Now you had me on your show, and we're going to talk RFK. They'll probably strike your channel and demonetize you. That's what they did to me.
We're don't worry. You know what? Actually,
I'll try not to say anything.
I have a technique to avoid that. It's simple. So just a quick disclaimer.
Smart.
All vaccines are safe and ethical for use, and you should conduct your local CDC website for more information. Talk to a real expert, get verified information. All elections are real. There is no evidence that there ever has been fraud. Vladimir Putin is a tyrant.
And a monster.
And we need to give more money to Ukraine. So
there you go.
Now they won't demonetize us. Now they won't strike us down. So actually,
why didn't I think of that? I should have done that.
All right, so
I'd still have my channel.
Lori, we've got a number of topics to talk about, mainly RFK Jr. I was ready to come in here and be a fanboy for him, and kind of and I were, and then I got news that there you go, Kennedy 24.
Got my Kennedy shirt on.
Yeah.
Fangirling.
But then we got news that he, deleted this podcast with Scott Ritter, and I mean, what's going on with that? So
that
I don't
hurt.
know, should we start with the good or the bad, Lori?
Oh hell, let's just get into it, because it's on my mind too. I don't always agree with Bobby. Sometimes we do get sideways. I mean, I still love him and I support him for president. I don't think we could do any better with president right now. I mean, look at who we have. And look who else is running. I mean, he's obviously the best guy in the race. But sometimes he lets me down. The Roger Waters deleted tweet let me down. I was very upset about that. But this, ooh, Jose, this hurts. This is personal. Scott Ritter's a friend of mine. And that's like, you don't throw my friend under the bus. That's what it felt like to me when he deleted that tweet. And I understand why he did it. I mean, I don't know if you saw the replies to that tweet, but he got swarmed by like thousands of NAFO trolls. And you know about NAFO, of course, right? That's the dog avatars that are pro-Ukraine, and they make some really horrible comments. They go below the belt, and the things they were saying about Scott were completely untrue. It's a lie. It's a smear. It's defamation of character in my mind, and I get it all the time. It happens every time I upload a video of one of my interviews with Scott, or if I tweet about Scott, anything with his name in it. Like, these guys have a coordinated campaign on Twitter and probably other social media platforms where anything with Scott's name in it, they'll find it. And then they just sick their army on that tweet. And so Bobby's tweet got attacked by thousands of these pro-war, pro-Ukrainian, pro-NATO trolls. And I think a lot of them are bots. I looked at a lot of those accounts, and they usually have a very low follower count. The account was just created within the past year, sometimes last week. A lot of those accounts looked fake. They looked like they were bots, and they all say the same thing, or they'll just post a picture of Scott's mugshot from 20 years ago. And it drives me crazy. I have to deal with it all the time, anytime I post about it. So what surprises me, Jose, is that you'd think Bobby would have known that that was coming. If you're going to tweet anything about Scott Ritter, you better be prepared for
and it's not the first time, right? Because he's had Scott Ritter on before, right?
Yeah, recently. He was on his podcast a couple of months ago. Back in April, yeah. And they had a great conversation. And they had another great conversation last night. And the funny thing is, the podcast itself of his interview with Scott, talking about the fallout from the Wagner coup, that's still up on Spotify. It's up on Apple Podcasts and most of the other podcast platforms. That's still up, but it's just the tweet that's gone. And somebody should have prepared Bobby for that. If he didn't know what was coming, you'd think someone on his campaign staff would have said, hey, Scott's pretty radioactive. If you say anything about him, they're going to come after you. And boy, they did. But what disappointed me was that he deleted the tweet. That's not a good look.
This is the second time we see something where Bobby kind of caves to pressure and he folds on something. I mean, look, what he did on June 20th in New Hampshire, I think, is an example of what a president, or honestly a leader, should do. And he's in a very unique position to do so because he happens to be the nephew of somebody who got their brains blown out, just to put it lightly.
But his father too.
Yeah, his father too, right? Saran and killed. And I do think there was intelligence operations within that too. I don't know if RFK Jr. has said that he believes that also, that the CIA killed his dad also.
He hints strongly in that direction, yes.
But the thing is, it's like sometimes he does these great things and then he'll do something where it makes me kind of run away from him,
It's one of those things. Sometimes he can self-contradict himself in the same paragraph.
Yeah.
He can say one thing and then say the other. And that's not something he's doing as a politician to try and be all things to all people. I should preface this by saying I've known him for 16 years. And I've seen a lot of his speeches and just been following him for a long time. And
wait, RFK Jr. for 16 years?
Yes. I was actually part of a Draft Kennedy campaign in 2007. We were trying to get him to run for the White House even then. After 8 years of Bush, I felt like he was the only guy who could save America. The time wasn't right, though. His children were still young, and he had one priority, and that was being a dad. And who could blame him, considering that he grew up fatherless and his 10 siblings did too? I can totally respect that. So it just seems like now's the right time. It wasn't then, but it is now. And if you think back to 2008, you remember Barack Obama was unstoppable. I don't even think Kennedy could have challenged Barack Obama successfully. And they were holding Obama up like the second coming of JFK, right? They kept making all those comparisons to his uncle, and all the other Kennedys had endorsed Obama. So it was awkward. It was
Sure.
very awkward. And we all know that Obama turned out to be selling false hope. Now, with hindsight, we see how dangerous that actually was. But at the time, nobody was questioning Obama much. Everybody just pushed him to the White House because he was black. And we wanted the first black president, and there he was, looking very presidential, even though most of us didn't know the first thing about him. But we found out. We found out. So I can say with some confidence that Bobby is a man of integrity. He's not a liar. He's not trying to posture or be all things to all people. It's just one of his personality quirks, I guess you'd call it. He's always been that way. He can be maddeningly self-contradictory at times.
Kynan, you got something?
Yeah, well, I'm glad you said that, Lori. And I don't know why he deleted the tweet. It was surprising to me because, Jose mentioned that he's been doing this podcast with Scott for a while, and for him to suddenly just delete it like that, it confused me.
Yeah.
And, someone should have advised them about all the allegations Scott has received. I mean,
Yes.
how could you have not known about it at this point, But
How could he have not known that Roger Waters was controversial on the Israel-Palestine thing? It sounded like that was news to him, like he wasn't aware of it. How could you be unaware?
Exactly. But, I mentioned that because I know Kennedy has gotten a lot of flack, and you probably saw that thing that Chris Hedges said on Brianna Joy show that, Kennedy, he comes from this privileged white family, he's an establishment person. He's not going to change anything, which it's funny that's coming from someone like Chris Hedges.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, but I think we should recognize in people that they do have a capability to change because, look at John F. Kennedy. I mean, he ran as, he was anti-communist as they come, right? But he was dramatically changed by the circumstances of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And, things that he said in 1962 may have contradicted with things that he said in 63 afterwards, where pushing for peace with the Soviet Union. And he actually wanted to cooperate with the Soviet Union on getting the man to the moon. That was going to be a joint mission. A lot of Americans don't even know that. So, people should recognize that, I think.
Absolutely. John F. Kennedy was always evolving. And so was Bobby's dad, Robert Kennedy. Talk about an evolution. I mean, he used to be even more, he was fanatically anti-communist. He worked on Joseph McCarthy's committee. He evolved on that too. Not to say that he ever became pro-communist, but he didn't want to needlessly have these wars, illegal wars of aggression like the Vietnam War, which he used to support. Robert Kennedy's public position for most of his career in the Senate was for the war. And it wasn't until 67, I believe, that he started to evolve against it and then ran in 68 against the war. But, a lot of that was more against, I think, President Johnson than it was the war. There was a personal beef between those two that's just legendary. And I think it was personal with Lyndon Johnson. He wanted his job and he was coming for it. And everybody thought that it was going to be this hot race, right? With Robert Kennedy challenging his foe, President Johnson. And 2 weeks later, President Johnson just stepped aside. He got out of the way. He said, I'm not going to run against Bobby Kennedy. And I thought that was actually a pretty good move.
I didn't know that. That's, because I mean, I've always heard that the plan initially for the Kennedy brothers was JFK was going to go 2 terms, and then Bobby was going to go 2 terms.
And then Teddy.
Oh, was that?
Yeah, Teddy was going to go next.
Well, you know, I'm sure Teddy got intimidated after he saw Robert F. Kennedy die.
And, you know, right after President Kennedy's death, I guess it was about 7 or 8 months later, Ted Kennedy nearly died in a plane crash off Martha's Vineyard. And I think there were 4 other people aboard, and they all died. And Senator Kennedy, his back was broken. He was in a traction, you know, where you have to lay down. He had to work on his belly for a year. He was in traction from head to toe. And for the rest, he almost died. Everyone else on that plane died. It's kind of a suspicious plane crash, honestly. I've always wondered about that, if they were trying to knock Teddy off. I have questions about what happened at Chappaquiddick, too. I'm not real sure Teddy was driving that car. Or if he was, he may have been drugged. There are all kinds of theories about what might have happened at Chappaquiddick, what really happened. But I know that the establishment wanted to stop Ted Kennedy too, just as they wanted to stop Bobby. But
what was Chappaquiddick?
That was in 1969, August of 69. It was Chappaquiddick's an island off Martha's Vineyard, and Ted Kennedy was hosting a party on the island, and late at night was supposedly taking one of the girls home. She was a girl that worked for him, Mary Jo Kopechne. He was supposed to be taking her home, but maybe they were drinking. It was a dark, narrow road on a Massachusetts island, and he went off a bridge. And the car drowned, and so did Mary Jo Kopechne. He almost drowned too, but he managed to swim and get out of the car. Says he made several attempts to save her life, kept diving back down into the waters to try and get the car door open, but it was jammed shut, and she drowned inside the vehicle. But there's a whole nother story about that. That's the very short version. He was charged with, I think he was charged with negligent manslaughter. Yeah. He beat the rap, of course, because he's Senator Ted Kennedy. And then the people of his district forgave him, and they kept voting for him again and again and again to send him back to the Senate. So
this is very interesting. I don't think I ever heard this. And
no kidding.
What is the other angle? I mean, wouldn't you just go off what Ted says? Like,
you know, I think that you have to put it into perspective that this was only 5 years after the death of JFK, about a year after the death of RFK, and the nation was traumatized. They still loved the Kennedys, and they wanted Teddy to be president. I think a lot of people wanted him to pick up the mantle. And even, you might not know this is an interesting story. At the 68 Democratic Convention, you know, the one in Chicago that got so crazy and violent, you know, Senator Robert Kennedy was dead by then, but there were many in the Democratic Party who were making a last-minute effort to try and talk Ted Kennedy into allowing them to place his name in nomination at the convention that year. And he was tempted. He seriously thought about it. But ultimately, I think he was still grieving Bobby's death, and he probably afraid of being assassinated too. And then less than a year later, you have the Chappaquiddick incident, which for all intents and purposes killed his chances of ever being president. Now, he did try. He tried in 1980 when he challenged President Jimmy Carter for the Democratic nomination, and I remember that well. I was a kid campaigning for Ted Kennedy. I was 11 years old, going door to door, you know, trying to convince people to vote for Teddy. I was a political animal even as a kid. And I truly believed in Ted Kennedy's run, but because of Chappaquiddick, you know, people had a long memory, and that was only 10 years later. They could not forgive Teddy ultimately for the death of Mary Jo Kopechne. He was blamed for that.
Was I mean, I knew there was a thing as a Kennedy curse and tragedy follows Kennedy, but I mean,
Indeed.
I didn't know about that story. I mean, the things I hear about are like, of course, the assassinations, a couple planes that went down that killed people, and also like even RFK Jr., like his first wife committed suicide right after they divorced.
Second wife.
Oh, second wife committed divorce.
Second wife. Yeah, she's the mother of 4 of his 6 children. Mary Richardson.
And who was the first one?
Emily Black, I think was her name. And she's the mother of Kit Kennedy and Robert Kennedy III.
Wow.
His oldest kids.
I see.
He's got a lot of kids. He's got 6 kids, and then he just adopted another one from his third wife, Cheryl Hines.
Oh, Irish Catholics.
7 children.
That's what Irish Catholics do. They just have tons of kids.
That's those Kennedys, man. I think he told me once he's got 82. No, it's more than that now. It was 82 cousins then. But that was 15 years ago. So now he's got over 100 cousins or something.
Jesus.
That's the Kennedys for you, though.
It's funny, Jose and I, we're both El Salvadorian, so we have tons of cousins, both in the U.S. and on the other side of the nation. And I don't think we even have that many cousins.
Yeah,
it's amazing. They do every 4th of July weekend. There's this big Kennedy gathering at Hyannisport, and they take a picture every year, like the annual family picture. And there's a huge lawn out there on the house at Hyannisport. You've seen it in all the news reels of the Kennedys. That's where they're out playing touch football and stuff. But you got to do an aerial shot, like with a drone, to be able to get all of these Kennedys in one picture.
Wow.
That's how many Kennedys there are.
So, Laura, let me ask you this question, and then I'm going to go and open the door for my cat that's crying for me to get him out of my room. One of the things that I feared is, well, let me ask you this. What are your thoughts on Dennis Kucinich running Bobby Kennedy's campaign?
I have all the respect in the world for Dennis. Been a fan of his for many, many, many years. I think he's one of the last good guys in politics. But I have my doubts about Dennis running the campaign, and I mean no disrespect, but I want Bobby to win. And Dennis does not have a track record of running campaigns that win. I mean, if you remember his run for the presidency in 2004, he didn't get any delegates. He didn't get a single state. He just didn't perform well. So I would like to see a campaign manager who has experience running winning campaigns. That's really important. And also I have some question about Dennis's age, because he's in his late 70s. Campaign manager, that's a day and night job. It's high stress. It's a lot of running, a lot of travel, a lot of running around. That's going to put a lot of stress on a person's body and their health. But as far as I can tell, Dennis is in great health. But yeah, I just have some questions about that. I love him. I'm glad he's involved with the campaign. I want him to do something important in this campaign. But I want to see a campaign manager who's ruthless. Like Bobby's father was. Bobby's father was Jack's campaign manager in 46 for the Congress and 52 for the Senate. And also when he ran for president. And man, Bobby Kennedy was a ruthless campaign manager, and he was good. And he needs someone at least as good as his dad who's ruthless. And I think that Dennis might be a little too nice.
Well, the thing is, my fear is that, Bobby Kennedy Jr. right now is running a campaign that's not very Democrat-like.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
See that again.
People keep asking him, well, why don't you switch parties, or why don't you run independent? And just between us, like, and the people watching,
thousands of other people.
I don't like it when people ask Kennedy, well, what are you going to do when you lose the primary? Because it's like, you don't do that in a fight, right? You don't go up to Muhammad Ali and say, so when you lose to, Joe Frazier, it's like,
he's got news for you. Yeah, because he ain't losing.
Right. So, like, I always, but my point is somebody like a Kucinich is very pragmatic in the Democratic Party and is going to rely on like old tricks.
Right.
And in my opinion, I think that's, again, I don't know any of this, is where a lot of this, like, no, you have to delete that because, you know, you're going to get all this pressure that we don't
that's
want.
Controversial. You can't say that.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, you know,
Well,
it's okay to...
wasn't scared of controversy.
Like, it's okay to say vaccines cause autism. Which, disclaimer, I'm not saying that's true, YouTube. Do not demonetize me. I'm just saying that's what someone else said.
That's what somebody else said. Yeah,
not me.
Kennedy said that.
Kennedy said that, but, you know, like, oh, but it's not okay to have Scott Ritter on your podcast, who's widely respected, internationally respected. People in Russia love the guy. People who are in the know that the allegations against him are just completely trumped up, you know, and he also gets accused of doing stuff that he just never did. You know, people say like he met with a girl in real life. No, it's not true. Nope. It's not what happened. No, and people don't bother to know about the case. And
never happened.
Yeah, you know, it's
never
like,
laid a hand on any underage girls.
Exactly. So, you know, I never know why it's the case that people, like, again, I don't know where this is coming from in his campaign, so I guess I'm just kind of like throwing something out here, you know. But like Kucinich is going to rely on these old tricks to be like, no, Bobby, that's not the kind of controversy we want to generate. No, don't go after Roger Waters. The Israeli lobby is very big. And by the way, like on the Israeli stuff, we had on Mark Rubert and Eric Hundley of America's Untold Stories. Those guys are very big, like pro-Israeli, like anti-Roger Waters. Like they went hard after Roger Waters and Max Blumenthal. And I love and respect those guys. Yeah. And it did make me realize how little I actually understood about the situation because they were referencing things that I was like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense. And I don't know enough to kind of counter them. And so I really respect them for coming on and sharing their side and view of things. Of course, we don't have to agree on everything, but
I need to watch that show.
It was a very good show.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, like the first four, it was actually about the Roger Waters deleted tweet that Bobby Kennedy put out. I remember I asked him, like, what are your thoughts on this? And, you know, you put out something about Israel and Egypt and the funding. And he said, well, you know, I think people, when they start talking about Israel, don't really know what they're talking about. And then, you know, he had a personal thing about his father or grandfather being one of the first people to go over to Israel when it was first, you know.
His father.
Yeah.
He was over there in 1947.
Yeah, and built one of the first Navy. Yeah, and you know, it's like the resolution to it, which is what I'm getting to. The way to resolve this tension between Israel, Palestine, good guy, bad guy, is what RFK Jr. said, which is why I really respected the speech on June 20th, because he said, you know, I almost imitated his voice again. I have a bad habit of doing that. Every time I quote RFK Jr., I start talking like this.
Yeah, I haven't heard anybody try to imitate him yet. Even my friend Derek Jackman, he's an impression comic, he won't do Kennedy because he thought it would be unfair to, you know, imitate a guy with a speech impediment.
Well, I've done it on the show before, so
right.
You know,
He's not very fortunately.
But you know, what did he say in his speech? He said, you know, we've you know, turned the politics in the world into good guy versus bad guy. That there's a villain and there's a you know, a superhero, right? That's not exactly how the world works. The world doesn't work that way at all. And when he said that, I was like, man, he's right, you know, because I know exactly about Shireen Abu Akleh in Palestine, right? I understand the settlements in the West Bank. I know about the apartheid state that's going on in Israel, right? Or Mark Rubert wouldn't call it apartheid. He had a whole thing about South Africa and how it's not the same thing. It's not. But anyway, I understand that there are atrocities, but at the same time, I look at people like Mark, and I look at people who live in Israel and people who support Israel. They're not evil people.
Right.
They're not. You know, just like the people who support Palestine aren't evil. You know, nobody is evil when it comes to, quote, their side. And to try and demonize people as villains and good guys and bad guys is actually what's wrong, is that we're dividing people and we're not able to actually really look at each other's sides and perspective, which is kind of the whole point of the Kennedy speech. You know, because when Kennedy at Amherst College says, you know, as Americans, we abhor communism, but we can also respect the achievements and great history of Russia. It's like saying, look, yeah, we don't have to be communist to appreciate the history of Russia.
And yet, when Kennedy made that speech in June of 63, do you know how controversial it was for the American president to admit that Russia won World War II on the European front? To give Russia, to say anything nice about the Soviet Union was forbidden. No president since FDR had anything nice or complimentary to say about the Soviets. It was all this tough talk, right? You had to appear tough on communism. That was just the way it was. Kennedy couldn't have gotten elected president in 1960 without the anti-communist rhetoric. Right. You had to look tough. He had to talk tough about Cuba. He had to talk tough about China and Russia. But, what he was accused of later in his presidency, and especially after the American University speech, was there were people saying that he'd gone full commie. They thought that he was a communist because he made that speech. They thought he was red. They accused him of being soft on communism, that he was an appeaser like Chamberlain, appeasing the dictators, blah, blah, blah. And he knew that was coming, but he said it anyway. And then he stuck by his guns, which is the right thing to do, because what he was working on was the nuclear test ban treaty.
Wow.
And that was more important than anything. And so he got his test ban treaty. It was signed 6 weeks later with him and Nikita Khrushchev. So that was a step in the right direction. I thought Kennedy played that exceedingly well. And he was careful in that speech. He chose his words with great care because he knew that there were a lot of Americans who would interpret them the wrong way and would think that he was praising communism, that he was praising our enemy, the Soviets.
That's what makes a great leader, is that a great leader doesn't cave to pressure or stick to the norms. He's the one who dictates them. He's the one who shapes it. Mm-hmm. And that's why in the United States, people say we live in a democracy. Well, we don't. We live in a republic, a constitutional republic, which has a democratic element to it, which is we elect our representatives.
Right.
And that's the thing, right? Like, it's a very difficult thing to do, to tell, even if 99% of people think you're wrong and you think you're right, we are not governed by mob rule. Meaning we don't have to be governed by what the 99% think. And people say, well, what, are you anti-democracy? And my response is always, well, should the majority always have a say, even if it's wrong? Because the majority right now has been misled into believing that we have to say, give all this money to Ukraine. Right? But people say, well, that's just the majority, right? That's just what's right. Well, back during the Jim Crow era in the civil, even before the civil rights struggle, like between the 1900s and the 1950s, you would have like lynch mobs go after, some black citizen.
Yeah.
And then the sheriff would pull up, right? And what's the sheriff going to do? They would say, well, we're the majority in our neighborhood, therefore we can do whatever we want because the majority thinks this is right. And that's my kind of
mob rule.
It's mob rule. Exactly. Yeah. It's not right. We have a democracy which we decide who represents us, in the Congress and in the Senate and in our city councils and in our state assembly and our state senatorship. I strongly believe in a republic. Mm-hmm. And I believe the citizenry actually plays the most important role. I believe the citizenry is the fourth branch of government because we decide who's actually in that position of power, in that authority. But oftentimes history is shaped by people who are unelected. Martin Luther King Jr. is one of the best examples.
Great point.
Gandhi is another one.
Mm-hmm. Malcolm X.
Patrice Lumumba. Was Patrice Lumumba elected as something?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, okay. Maybe he's not a good, but still, Patrice Lumumba wasn't even.
Yeah, but there are so many examples you could give of people who were never elected to any political office and yet had a much greater impact on the world politically, perhaps like a musician, maybe John Lennon, right? Powerful voice for peace.
Yeah, exactly. And well, Kanye, do you have something?
Yeah, well, just on the speech itself, which I think is, probably the best speech we've gotten in a long time. The best speech I've certainly heard in my lifetime. But, you know, RFK says at the end that we have to revive President Kennedy's maxims. You really see the ghost of JFK speaking through that speech, And,
Yes.
the question of tragedy, one thing that comes to mind is Shakespeare's Hamlet, right? Because
Absolutely.
it's the ghost of Hamlet. He's talking to his son. He's saying, "You need to avenge me. You need to retake the kingdom of Denmark because there's something rotten in it." But Hamlet fails to do that, and it's not really a failure within Hamlet himself as an individual, but in the entire population as a whole. And I think until really Americans confront the fact that Kennedy was assassinated, it wasn't just a lone gunman; it was the result of a conspiracy, and until they really appreciate the American University speech, which really recalls what the United States was from its foundation. We wanted to build a community of principle among sovereign nation states. We didn't want to have a Pax Americana, as JFK said, but we wanted to have peace in the world. We wanted to develop other nations. And, Jose, you were talking about, the concept of a republic, what a citizen has to do. A citizen, I think, has to act now and circulate that speech to everyone they know. Because frankly, who knows if we can wait till the election, given,
Exactly.
this crazy thing that happened in Russia, right? With this. So people have to act now, I think.
It's getting crazier by the moment. And I have the same concern as you about how much time we've got. I hear President Trump say, I could end this tomorrow. I could end it in one day. If you wait until January 20th of 2025, he wants to be president again first. And, I'm thinking to myself, but Trump, you've got your own plane. Dude, just fly over there now. I mean, there's no reason on earth. You don't have to be the president to be a broker of peace. You're a very powerful man. Zelensky likes you. I don't know about Putin. I don't know how you guys are getting along, but I know Zelensky and Trump get along. So, he should knock their heads together. Get Putin and Zelensky talking. That would really upset the deep state if Trump went over there and actually did that. But, we saw Jimmy Carter do that between Israel and Palestine. And, at least even if you're not successful, it's important to try. It's also very good optics if you're running for president to not only talk the talk, but to walk the walk. And I encourage Bobby Kennedy to do that too. I think he ought to, and if he can't get his ass on a plane to go to Russia or doesn't want to go to a war zone, okay, well, pick up the phone. Have a Zoom meeting, for crying out loud. You want to save the planet? Don't take a private jet to Russia. Just get on Zoom. Get Putin on Zoom and Zelensky and just have a meeting. I think they would meet with you if you asked, but none of these politicians seem to be interested in just asking for a damned meeting. I encourage everybody running for president, especially the president of the United States, Joe Biden, to just pick up the phone. Try to talk to these guys. You'd be surprised that the Russians can be very friendly. I'm sure that the Ukrainians will be friendly because they're getting a hell of a lot of our money. They better take our calls, right? But we need someone with some real power and some real diplomatic skills, which our diplomats lack. Anthony Blinken's no good at it. Victoria Nuland's no good at it. All they can do is talk that Russophobic, aggressive kind of talk that's getting us nowhere. We've got to have someone who's fair to both sides, in between, trying to negotiate peace. And China's trying, and Saudi Arabia's trying, and Africa's trying. They're all sending their people. Why aren't we sending ours? Why aren't we sending our leaders, our diplomats, to intervene, to try and broker a peace before the election? How many people are going to die between now and January 2025? Trump said in that town hall he did with CNN that he wanted to stop the killing, stop the bloodshed. How about now? Why don't we just do that now? Why do we have to wait a year or more?
No, Lori, that's a great idea. I didn't even think about it that way. That Trump could just do something right now. Why
He
does he
sure
keep
could.
talking about it?
Yes. I mean, he says he wants the power of the presidency behind him when he negotiates, but to hell with that. You've got so much power as an ex-president. Why isn't Obama over there? Well, I think we know the answer to that. Why isn't Bill Clinton over there?
Right.
Why isn't somebody over there?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean,
right?
They could just latch onto the Chinese peace proposal and say, listen, the Chinese have put forward the NATO summit is coming up, the NATO peace summit, supposedly. They should be intervening on that. They should be saying, okay, well, if the NATO summit wants to be taken seriously, here are some peace proposals. How about you talk about this?
Damn right.
Like, why? Wow, and that's,
why are we waiting for the next president to do something? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, here's something that our friend Dennis Speed was talking about. He was saying that what we need to do is we need to activate the process of the presidency, not the electoral, but the presidency. And I think this is kind of what makes RFK Jr. different than Trump, because Trump keeps saying, if you elect me, I'll end the war. Easy, done, 24 hours. But RFK is saying, let's end it right now. he's
Good one.
He's
nice
saying,
Trump.
Yeah, I've been working on my Trump for a long time.
Very good. I'd never heard it before.
Thank you. But RFK called at the end, and we're going to play this at some point. He said, to charter a course for the future of our military, he quoted his uncle, and then he said, I call on the current administration, who'll be in power for another year and a half, to listen to the maxims of my uncle.
Mm-hmm.
That right there is a call. That's leadership right there. He says, okay, maybe I don't have the authority of the presidency right now. That means he's still a citizen. And there is nothing more powerful than the role of the citizen to the presidency. Okay, the Frederick Douglass to Abraham Lincoln. Okay, the Dr. King to the JFK. These men completely influenced the evolution of both of those presidents, right? And I'm sure there are other examples in history, right, of that exact same relationship. And I do think Bobby Kennedy could have that quality. He showed it, as a citizen, asking the current administration to do something, right? That right there, see, people get on me because I put out a tweet the other day asking AOC to get her mind together and call it an end to war, right?
Yeah.
People say, well, she's completely bought. Yeah, she is completely bought.
She is.
Yes, she is sold out, yes. But I think out of all the Congress people, there has to be something in her that's very small. A tiny voice that she shut off in the prison cells, like in the Cask of Amontillado. You ever read that Poe story?
Yes.
Before? Right?
Yes.
Okay.
Good one.
What she's done is she's put up these bricks and she's locked her conscience away, but she knows it's there. Okay? She needs to grow a spine, because I am a firm believer that somebody like her, who comes out against this war, is going to completely turn the tides of support.
It could. War. She has a lot of influence. She turned anti-war. Even if she waited this late, just stick your finger in the air and see which way the wind is blowing. And it seems like the wind's blowing this way. She ought to come over with us.
I would be the first to welcome her back and defend her. No, seriously. And Canada and I are famous for going after her. But
I know. Well, she represents your district, right? You live in her district?
Kynan does, I think.
No,
I guess. Well, not anymore because of the redistricting stuff they've done.
I mean, Grace Meng.
I see.
Yeah, he's Grace Meng, but for example, we have and also I guess I'm going to put a little shout out here to Greg, who I think is still in the chat. We have these posters here. I think you might have seen these too, Laura. I think yes. Here we go.
Oh, the Obama poster. Yeah.
So this was made by our friend Greg. I think he's still in the chat. He's at Big Mad Crab in the chat. This one was made by Greg. It's just war. And for anybody watching, we are raising money to print these because we want to put these out in her district. We want to really come after her.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's
good. Yeah. No, we really want to come after her. This one I made, Keep 'em Poor, Die in War. Not as good.
Love that. No, that's great.
Yeah, another
That's
one.
great.
We want to. First, well, we're gonna print these, and what we're gonna do. Well, I don't know if I should say this, but we're gonna go and give these to her at her district office.
Personally deliver them.
Yeah, exactly. Because we want to
Good.
give her something that we think represents the values of her position and of her congressional authority. What she's done. Something that represents her values. So yeah, that's
Just
what. And
put
if
it in
people
her
want to,
face. Yeah. Say, this is you. This is the mirror. This is
yeah,
your voting record. This is you. Is this what you want your legacy to be?
yeah, exactly. We're trying to really shake this out of her. I do think
Good.
it possible, and
Good.
so
Go get her.
yeah,
Go
no.
get
And
her,
if people
Jose.
want to help us print the money, or print not the money. Don't print money. That's illegal.
Yeah, you can't do that.
But if you want to help us print the posters, you can send super chats, or I have the Cash App thing on the Twitter, so people can help us do that. But my main point is this: I am trying to appeal to her conscience and to Jamal Bowman, even though these people are terrible. I am trying to appeal to their conscience. I don't think it's as futile, because RFK Jr. trying to appeal to the current administration is no different than the citizens who need to stand up to their representatives and do the same thing. No matter
Do
how
you think they're
blunt.
listening? You think Joe Biden's going to do any of those things Bobby asked him to do?
Well, see, here's the thing. Brianna Joy Gray was talking about why she supports Marianne Williamson. I'm not a Williamson supporter at all. She's terrible in Ukraine, but
Yeah, she is.
she was saying it's important that there are people, because she was saying, well, why doesn't Marianne run independent? And she was like trying to defend why they run as Democrats. She was saying, well, it's important that people challenge Biden because it'll push Biden to the left, and it'll make Ozzy.
Is that a cat?
Yeah, it's my cat.
Is your cat named Ozzy?
Ozymandias.
Oh, I love it.
But we call him Ozzy for sure. Ozzy.
Somebody wants attention. Do we get to see the cat? I want to see the cat.
Yeah, sure.
Let's see the cat.
Oh, no,
My cat is perched right over on top of my office chair, staring at me right now.
Well, we have to see your cat.
Yeah.
He was
Come over here.
on.
Hey,
Oh,
kitty.
oh, here he is. He's got the zoomies right now. That's what's going on.
Yeah, I just saw the tail. That's all I got to see of the cat was the tail.
Yeah, he's got the zoomies right now. I'll get him when he's a little calmer.
They'll be back.
Yeah, he'll be back.
Let's come
But
back.
what was I saying?
They never come when you want them to, right? We're trying to show each other our pets, and that's when the cat won't come.
Exactly. What was I saying? Oh, yeah, Jamal Bowman, AOC. Look, these people are terrible, but Jamal Bowman the other day was, Brian, wow, thank you so much for the $10. Why that puts us over the edge? That puts us over the edge. You can now check out. Thank you, Brian, so much. Cat food. Thank you very much.
Awesome, dude.
Look, even though these people are terrible, I'll keep that up for a bit. Even though these people are terrible, Jamal Bowman was caught on camera by a friend of mine, Liam Cosgrove. Right? He's a reporter now. He does for Zero Hedge and also for Gray Zone. He's a good guy. Great guy. One of the best. But he caught Jamal Bowman and he asked him, hey, well, what do you know about the Donbass and Lugansk? And Jamal Bowman's like, I don't know.
I don't know anything about that.
Why don't you educate me? And he says, well, this is like the whole reason the Ukraine war started,
Right, I saw that clip.
I genuinely think Jamal Bowman, if he stopped being so damn hard-headed and stopped, if he took the muzzle off from the Democrat. See, the thing is, all these squad people are completely impotent because they've been muzzled by the Democratic Party.
And they've been brainwashed and propagandized. All they know, they don't know anything about the history of this situation. They don't know anything about Nazis in Ukraine or any of that. All they know is Putin is bad and we have to stop him because he's evil. That's all they know. Where do you think they learned that?
Exactly. And like, that's the thing. Because, see, I've said this before. There's a documentary coming out of me next month. I hope next month. But done by Due Dissidents. I don't know if you know them. They're good guys.
Yeah.
So they came to my house and then they did like an interview with me and stuff here. That'll be coming out soon. I said this then. I said, look, the thing is AOC and company probably think that she knows more than the population because they get briefings, right? And not just any kind of briefings. They get briefings by the FBI and the CIA. Like, Here's what's going on domestically that are confidential, classified, right? Here's what's going on in Ukraine that the general population doesn't know. Here's what's going on here in the U.S. that the population doesn't know, right? So she's probably thinking to herself, like, oh, if only they knew what I knew, you know? But that's the thing. They're lying to her. They're, you know.
Of course.
They are. She was probably briefed on the fact that if this Washington Post story is true, that spies knew 2 weeks in advance that Prigozhin was going to do a coup. Let's assume she was briefed on that. That means she knew that was coming. And she probably didn't even know what the hell that meant. Okay, I guess, you know, right? She probably thinks she knows more than we do. And that's the problem. That's how they go after these congressmen. It's like, no, don't listen to the criticism. Like, you can't respond to it because it'd be classified for you to start going into it, and then you'll get in trouble if you start leaking classified reports. So, you know,
it's amazing, isn't it, how naive these people are, even though they're holding positions of high power. It's as if they don't have access to the internet. I mean, do they ever read Twitter? Do they read the replies to their own tweets? Do they read their own mail at the office?
No, because it's right-wing propaganda, all of it.
It's all yeah, it's Russian propaganda. So you're telling me there's that many Russians living in the United States and that Russian people are the only people who believe that Russia is justified in invading Ukraine. I mean, how naive could they possibly be? That's why I don't think they're actually as naive or as dumb as they sound. I think they're often playing dumb, and I also think they're heavily propagandized and lied to by the intelligence community. And again, that gets back to being so naive. How can you hold elected office or serve on a committee that, you know, has say so over the military's purse or the CIA's purse and not know that they lie? That's what they do for a living. They're literally lying to you, Congressman. They're lying to you, Senator. They're lying to you, Mr. President. John F. Kennedy figured that out, but he didn't figure it out until he got into the White House. It was the Bay of Pigs that made him realize he could not trust his own CIA.
Yes.
Yeah. And then it happened again, the missile crisis, where he was getting some pretty bad advice from the top brass in the military and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But he had the judgment to be able to look at this and say, no, I'm not going to do that. No matter how much pressure you put on me. And there was a lot of pressure on President Kennedy during both the Bay of Pigs and the missile crisis to invade Cuba. They wanted to put 250,000 troops, U.S. troops, on the island of Cuba. They wanted a full-fledged American invasion. And they kept pressuring Kennedy for that his entire presidency. All the while, they're also pressuring him to go into Laos and to go into Vietnam. And, you know, he was always often the lonely guy in the room. You can hear the tapes of the Cuban Missile Crisis. I don't know if you've ever listened to those, but there are White House tapes that have now been released where you can hear what was going on in those ExComm meetings, the whole 13 days. And Kennedy is literally the only guy in the room who does not want to invade Cuba or bomb Cuba or provoke the Soviet Union in any way. He's the only one who understood how to do diplomacy in his entire administration.
Yeah. Do you remember the tape, or did you hear this tape of Kennedy? He's talking about the assassination of, or the coup of
Diem?
Of who?
Of Diem in Vietnam?
Yes.
Yeah, that was
And so
November 1st, 1963.
He's talking in his tape recorder.
Yeah.
You know, and he's talking, you know, he was a good leader. I didn't want or he never made it very clear. I mean, you might know the story a little bit better than I do. I think it was the case that he never outright explicitly said, don't do it. He kind of like left it up to ambiguity, or he never was firm on we should not coup Diem. And
until it was too late.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was at the last minute that he tried to send messages over there saying, don't let this happen. But by then it had already happened.
Oh,
yeah.
Wow.
It was at the last minute, but he was sort of ambiguous about it until then.
Yeah,
it was.
I think
go on.
in that tape, Jose, that the kind of ambiguity that he conveyed is what gave Henry Cabot Lodge, who I think was ambassador at the time,
Correct.
to go ahead and
That's
carry
right.
with them.
Yeah. That was Lodge's deal for sure.
Well, actually, you know what? Maybe we might play one of those, that one, because I think it's very haunting, actually.
It gives me chills to this day to listen to it.
Because he's talking, all of a sudden his son comes in the room.
Oh, yeah.
And then what does he start doing? He starts talking about the seasons.
Hmm.
You know, why do we go to the ranch in the fall? Yeah, right. And
you do a pretty good JFK there, too.
You should hear my Bobby Kennedy, you know.
Oh, you do, Bobby?
When he says not Junior, but the dad, yeah, when he's reciting Aeschylus after Martin Luther
King.
Yeah, and he says, you know, what is he says, even in our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart. And
it's good.
And in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom to the awful grace of God.
Right on the money. You got that. I know that speech like the back of my hand. So
it's a good you know, one of his okay, here we go.
I think it's his finest speech ever. Bobby Kennedy's best speech.
No, it's you know, it was one of my I found the thing here on DM. Let's see. Share tab audio. Yes.
This is President Kennedy's dictaphone recording?
Yes.
Yes.
November 4th. Let's see if we can hear it.
This was supposed to be for his memoirs, the book that he never got to write.
Oh, is that why he was recording these?
That's why he did the dictations. Sorry, I can't talk. And also why he ran the White House tapes.
All right, so let's see here if we can hear it here. There's no audio yet.
Monday, November 4th, 1963. Over the weekend, the coup in Saigon took place. Culminated 3 months of conversation about a coup, conversation which divided the government here and in Saigon. Opposed to a coup was General Taylor, the Attorney General, Secretary McNamara, to a somewhat less degree, John McCone, partly because of an old hostility to Lodge, which causes him to lack confidence in Lodge's judgment, partly as a result of a new hostility, because Lodge shifted his station chief, semicolon, in favor of the coup was State, led by Abel Harriman, George Ball, Roger Hillsman, supported by Mike Parkdale at the White House. I feel that we must bear a good deal of responsibility for it, beginning with our cable of early August, in which we suggested the coup. Period, in my judgment, that wire was badly drafted. It should never have been sent on a Saturday. I should not have given my consent to it without a roundtable conference in which McNamara and Taylor could have presented their views. While we did redress that balance in later wires, that first wire encouraged Lodge along a course to which he was, in any case, inclined. Hawkins continued to oppose the coup on the ground that the military effort was doing well. There was a sharp split between Saigon and the rest of the country. Politically, the situation was deteriorating. Militarily, it had not had its effect. There was a feeling, however, that it would. For this reason, Secretary McNamara and General Taylor supported applying additional pressures to Zim and New in order to move them.
Hello. Naughty.
Why do the leaves fall? Why does the snow come on the ground?
Because
Why do the leaves turn green? And where do we go to Cape Ansport? It's summer.
and then you know
I was shocked by the death of Zim and knew. I'd met Zim with Justice Douglas many years ago. He was an extraordinary character. While he became increasingly difficult in the last months, nevertheless, over a 10-year period, he held this country together, maintained its independence under very adverse conditions. The way he was killed made it particularly abhorrent. The question now is whether the generals can stay together and build a stable government, or whether Saigon will turn on public opinion in Saigon, intellectuals, students, etc., will turn on this government as repressive and undemocratic in the not too distant future.
Right,
Yeah.
you are, President Kennedy. You know what's kind of interesting? Why he put the taping system in the White House? The first president to have a taping system was John Kennedy, but he put it in after the Bay of Pigs because they lied to him and he knew it. And then they turned around and pretended they didn't lie, and everybody started changing their story. So the real reason he put that taping system in was to have a secret recording of these guys, because he knew the bastards would turn and change their story publicly later to cover their ass. So that's why he put it in the first place. And you notice in that recording that we just listened to, notice how specific he is about the names involved and the chain of events and the dates and the meetings. And he wants a record of all that because he knows everyone's going to change their story and lie. But he's got the truth down in his own words.
Wow.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Karen.
And he admitted that he made a mistake. How often do you hear presidents admit that?
Exactly. I actually wanted to bring something else up and to supplement that because, Lori, I think you were talking about RFK's involvement in the early decisions in Vietnam. And I want to just read this quote because this is something that sticks out to me, especially given the last thing you said about being willing to change. But he had said, this is him talking about Vietnam in 1968, spring of 1968. He said, "I was involved in many of the early decisions on Vietnam, decisions which helped set us on our present path. It may be that the effort was doomed from the start, that it was never really possible to bring all the people of South Vietnam under the rule of a successive government. We supported governments one after the other riddled with corruption, inefficiency, and greed. Governments which did not and could not successfully capture and energize the national feelings of their people. If that is the case, as it well may be, then I am willing to bear my share of the responsibility before history and before my fellow citizens. The past error is no excuse for its own perpetration. Tragedy is a tool for the living to gain wisdom, not as a guide by which to live. Now as ever, we do ourselves best justice when we measure ourselves against ancient tests. As in the Antigone of Sophocles, all men make mistakes, but a good man yields when he knows his course is wrong, and repair is the evil. The only sin is pride." And I just bring that up because, of course, RFK, had known about the decision by Henry Cabot Lodge to overthrow Diem and then kill him in the process. He was there for that and he objected to it. And I mean, it gives you a real insight into leadership, that these people that you elect may not go in automatically knowing what to do, given how terrible the swamp is. But if they're willing to change and actually make the right decisions in the process and evolve, that's the thing we should look at.
Absolutely. And that's one of those things about the Kennedys. It's one of the reasons why people still love them. And a lot of people who are older and remember those years, remember them when they were alive. You saw Jack and Bobby and Teddy too. They evolved a lot over the course of their lives and their careers. I've been a Kennedy historian now for 40 years, studying the presidency of John Kennedy. Not just how he died. I study the assassinations a lot, but I'm really more interested in how they lived, what made them tick. And, all of his life, RFK Jr. has been sort of that standout I guess you'd say, in the Kennedy family. I don't know if you knew about this, but President Kennedy's best friend from the time he was a young teenager was a guy named Lem Billings. It's gay, closeted gay man. I mean, everybody knew he was gay in the inner circle, but nobody said anything because it was, it was the 30s, 40s, and 50s. You had to be closeted back then. But President Kennedy's best friend was a gay man, and Lem Billings was always there at the White House, like sleeping in the Lincoln bedroom. He was like Jack's right hand man. But after Jack died, Lem Billings took a special liking to Bobby Jr. And those two, I mean, Bobby Jr. lived with him for quite some time. Bobby, after his father died, he got into drugs. He started smoking weed, started doing harder drugs, started doing heroin, got kicked out of the house. Ethel sent him packing. And he kind of went like a lot of hippie kids did in 1968. He hit the road hitchhiking. And he needed a place to stay. So Lem Billings took him in. And Lem had always loved him. But even as a teenager, Lem Billings, who knew President Kennedy when he was that age and knew that one day John Kennedy would be president, he knew that one day Robert Kennedy would be president. Lem Billings believed that until the day he died. And he and Bobby stayed very close all their lives. And I believe Bobby Jr. still administers the Lem Billings papers at the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library. But yeah, he had a special place in his heart for Lem Billings. But the point I'm trying to make is Lem was one of many who saw something special in Bobby, even as a kid, and knew that if he ever grew up and got his act together and got off the drugs and didn't die or OD in the process, if he could just do that, that he could be president someday, maybe be a great president. And many people throughout Bobby's life have wanted him to run, including me. I was trying to talk him into it 16 years ago. I really believe that he's got that special something that's not, it's in the family DNA, but not every member of the Kennedy family had those lucky genes, shall we put it that way? His older brother, Joseph Kennedy, was a congressman for many years, had to leave Congress because of a marital divorce scandal that got messy back in the 90s. As you know, outside of Senator Ted Kennedy, other Kennedys have really not done that well in politics. Most of the Kennedys who've been elected to any office didn't last too long. And Bobby has never held elected office before in his life. Despite all the pressure to run for something, he never actually did. This is his first time running for any office ever. So he's learning as he goes, folks. Don't expect him to be perfect right out of the chutes. He's going to stumble. He's going to make mistakes, just like his father did, just like President Kennedy did, and Teddy too. And like we talked about Chappaquiddick earlier, there's a big one that he could never quite recover from. But as far as I know, Bobby hasn't killed anybody. Nobody's drowned in his car. So I think he's, like you said, he's got so many skeletons in his closet that if they could all vote, he'd be king of the world. So there's going to be some stuff coming out in the press that looks bad. And it is what it is. He has to explain that if he chooses to. And it's not for me to say. It's not for anyone who isn't Bobby to say what happened there. And I certainly wasn't there. I don't know what happened when he was doing heroin all those years ago. All I know is what I read in the funny papers. And you know how he got sober? Did you ever hear the story?
No.
Well, he almost died. He OD'd on a flight. This is like 1983. And he was on a flight to South Dakota. And I guess he went in the bathroom to take some drugs. He went to shoot up and OD'd and passed out, turned blue. Somebody, checked on him, found him in there unconscious. They had to make an emergency landing to get him help. And they took him to the hospital, saved his life, and then promptly put him under arrest for possession. And that was like his come to Jesus moment. And he'd been an addict for, I think, 14 years.
Wow.
He called himself a functioning addict. And I guess that's true because it's pretty hard to function when you're doing heroin. I don't know. I've never done heroin, but I know it really knocks you out. How did he manage to go to Harvard and the University of Virginia Law School and get a law degree and pass the bar and be a practicing attorney and write books? And obviously he was functional during those years, and he was married and having kids, and very functional guy. You can see interviews with Bobby back in the 70s, and they're very impressive. Even then, you're thinking, hey, this guy ought to run for president. There was something special there. But he had a drug problem, and he kept it well hidden, like a lot of heroin addicts do. It's a very private, secret kind of addiction. But somehow he managed to put on a good face in public and be completely functional. So he's been sober for more than 40 years now. So I don't think there's any trouble with a relapse or going back to his old ways. That's a long, long time behind him.
Well, we certainly have no problem with people who have their own personal failings.
That's right.
Martin Luther King Jr. was not perfect.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
A bit of a horn dog.
And a man of the Lord, too.
But it's not our imperfections that make us who we are. It's the fact that we can do something that is above us all, something that is greater than ourselves,
Right. Which kind of brings us back to where we started with our friend Scott Ritter. There's a guy who's stumbled. There's a guy who made some mistakes. And I don't know about you, but that's what I want. I mean, when I look at Bobby's skeletons and his mistakes, that's what I want in a president. I don't want somebody perfect. I don't want Jesus. I want somebody who's made mistakes in their life. I want somebody who's fallen down and gotten back up.
Yeah, no, and
that's
think it's
wisdom.
I think it's good that we have leaders like that. I mean, when I look at my own personal life, kind of knows about my so-called skeletons, and we're all imperfect, every single one of us. And I think if we have leaders that are also imperfect, it shows that we can still be great, even though we have our own shortcomings and our failings. Actually, Shakespeare talks about this, and I find it funny because Scott Ritter's wife is still with him, even after all the things,
Marina's still there.
There's one of my favorite Shakespeare plays is it's a comedy, or one of the darker what is it called? It's not Much Ado About Nothing, kind of. It's a really dark one.
One of his dark love stories. He's got a lot of them.
No, it's
what happens? What happens in it?
It's the one about so in this play, there's a king, and the problem is the society has basically collapsed. Nobody's following the laws anymore.
Oh, Measure for Measure.
Measure for Measure. That's what Right, so in Measure for Measure, right, there's a king, and the king is like, I don't know what to do anymore because nobody's listening to me. Nobody cares about the law. Nobody's following the law. I'm going to go on a hiatus for a bit, and I'm going to institute somebody else. And then the somebody else is somebody who's like extreme hardline, like fundamentalist, like we're going to prosecute everyone to the fullest extent of the law. And so the plot of the here you go. Here he is, by the way.
Oh, he's a black and white.
He's a tuxedo.
He's cute.
He's a good boy.
Wow. Look at that white belly. Look at that white belly.
He's a good boy. Okay, he's good.
He's got socks, too.
Oh, he's got socks. Yeah, he's got socks.
Aww.
Yeah. But
it's so cute.
In Measure for Measure, right? So this new king comes in. He's like, okay, well, since the old king is going to take a hiatus, I'm the new king, and I'm not going to do things the way things were done before. So here's what's going to happen. So in the story, I think it's Antonio who gets his girlfriend pregnant before they're married, and so now he's going to lose his head over it. So he's going to lose his head over it because he got his girlfriend pregnant, and then he tries to plead with the king, like, but hey, like, we were going to get married in 2 weeks. we were gonna get married in 2 weeks. Like, we had the wedding and everything. Like, I'm sorry I knocked her up before, she was supposed to be okay. It was okay for her to be pregnant. And he's like, no exceptions. You're gonna lose your head. So this new king, Claudio, is like really a terrible guy. And so Antonio is like, hey, go get my sister. My sister's about to be a nun. Maybe she can plead with the king, And so the sister comes and she's like, listen, Claudio, I get it. As a nun, one of the sins I abhor the most is lust, and premarital sex. I'm with you on that. But my brother shouldn't have to die for it. And so the king's like, all right, give me a day to think about it. All right, so the next day comes. And Claudio's like, okay, everybody leave except for you. So the woman, who's about to be a nun, he's like, okay, so I thought about what you said. If you give me your virginity, I will let your brother go.
Too late.
And she's like, wait, I can't give you my virginity because I'm trying to be a nun. And if I give you my virginity, I can't be a nun. And secondly, that'd be premarital sex. Like, you would be committing the same. And he's like, who the hell's going to believe you? Who's going to believe you? Nobody's going to believe you. And so she goes to her brother and she's like, listen, bro, I don't have good news. And at first he's like, you know what, sis, it's okay. Like, I get it. Like, you're a nun. Like, adultery's not good. I get it. And she's like, I'm glad you understand. He's like, but out of all the sins, this one can't be that bad. I mean, you got to have sex to multiply, right? The first thing in Genesis says, be fruitful and multiply. And, right. You're not killing anyone. If anything, you're propagating life. So, I mean, of all this, you really won't do this for me? Really? You want me to die just because you want? And so they started arguing and bickering about this. And it turns out the king was there the whole time, dressed as a friar, watching behind the scenes. And so I won't spoil the ending too much, but at the end, the new king is brought to trial, and he's going to lose his head. The old king's like, okay, now you're going to die for everything you did. And here's why I brought this up. It all comes back around. Turns out that the new king was actually married before to a woman named Mariana. Okay, so the asshole king was married before, but he ran away from her. So they were technically still married. And so Mariana is like, no, don't kill him. Do not kill him. I know he's an asshole, but he's my asshole. And I think the exact line is something like, look, the best men are made out of some faults.
Yeah.
But they need to be given room to grow and improve. And the only way to do that is through mercy and forgiveness. Otherwise, people can't grow. And so with Scott Ritter and his wife, I think back to that situation. I'm like, okay, you fucked up, but I'm your wife. And she probably did kick his ass.
I'm told, yeah, she did. That's what Scott tells me.
Okay. He says it too. I mean, last time we interviewed him, he's like, okay, I got to get to my wife now. I got to make sure she's happy. Yeah. So,
heard that.
You're
going to spend the rest of your life doing that, buddy.
Is the quality of mercy. Okay? That right there shows a divine principle in all of us. That is also what FDR talks about. Better a government that errs in that spirit of charity.
Right.
Okay, if you have a president who actually wants the best for you and is acting on that axiom, then it's okay if they make a mistake, because it's better that they do that rather than a government that is intentionally trying to kill you.
That's right. That's right. And I personally believe that our current government is trying to kill us.
Yes.
I think they've killed a lot of us in the last 3 years. I know we're on YouTube, so I won't say any more than that. But you know where I'm going with it. I'll just stop there.
Again, disclaimer, we believe in vaccine. If you need more information, please visit cdc.gov.
That's right.
You can get all the best and accurate information up to date. Vladimir Putin's a tyrant. Okay, we need Slava Ukraina. So.
Slava Ukraina. I ain't doing that thing with the arm, though. I ain't doing it.
So you really
can't bring myself to do that. No. Get the arm down. Get it down. No.
Slava. It's like the scene from Dr. Strangelove, where he's like trying to, and he just keeps
That's
putting
the
his
one.
arm-
That's what I was doing. I was doing the Peter Sellers.
Mine, no. Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah, right, exactly. All right, Lori, we're
Oh.
coming up to almost 11 o'clock here.
Wow.
Kind of, do you have anything else you wanted to say?
Well, yeah, you first.
Okay, well, I do have one question for you, Lori.
Sure.
It's not like incredibly like significant or anything, but I want to know your opinion on Seymour Hersh because I know he wrote this book on the JFK administration. I forget something
Dark Side of Camelot.
Right. And he actually had Oliver Stone on not too long ago, and we asked him about the Nord Stream pipeline question, and he said he's a really reliable journalist in that respect, and the story is very authentic, and it's most likely what happened. But with respect to what he did on the JFK administration, I mean, a lot of the sources that he used for that book came from CIA sources. I think Rick Helms was one of them, right? One of those hardliners against Kennedy. So, and I don't really know too much about it. I never read the book, but since you're an expert on this, I'd like to know about that.
Sure. I know that the trend right now is everybody worships Seymour Hersh because of his reporting on Nord Stream, which is very good. But sometimes Cy is very, very wrong. He's gotten it wrong many times in the past. He's also, I guess what I would caution people out there is, first of all, if you ever read The Dark Side of Camelot, take it with several grains of salt, because when you trace the sources of those stories back to their original source, it's almost always, well, and 100% of the time, actually, it's always somebody who is connected to the CIA. So you have to take all of those stories with grains of salt. Most of them have been completely debunked and proven false a long time ago. And certainly, Cy Hersh's Achilles heel, which can also give him some good reporting, is he's got a lot of sources inside the intelligence community, always has. And they feed you a little truth if you're a journalist, just enough truth to make a good story. And then they mix that truth with a lot of bullshit. And what a good journalist has to do is separate the truth from the bullshit, because they are giving you things like, I like to talk about, say, false sponsors of the JFK assassination as one example. For example, you've got the Castro did it theory, the mob did it theory, the Russians did it theory, the KGB did it theory, the LBJ did it theory. Everybody's got the aliens did it theory. I guarantee you, when you trace those back to their sources, almost every single one of those conspiracy theories was concocted and pushed in the press by the CIA. And that's their way of saying, oh, look over here, look over there, look everywhere except at the CIA. So you really do have to be skeptical when you read Cy Hersh. I think he probably got the Nord Stream story about right. How would I know? I can't prove it or disprove it. I wasn't there at the bottom of the sea when they blew the darn thing up. But I can tell you that in the past, the CIA literally blew up a Russian natural gas pipeline in 1982, the Trans-Siberian Pipeline. They blew that sumbitch up, blew it up sky high. It was the biggest explosion ever on planet Earth that wasn't nuclear, ever. And the CIA, it took them 25 years to admit it, that they were behind it, and then they bragged about it. And it was there. They did it for the same reasons they did Nord Stream. The Trans-Siberian Pipeline was a natural gas pipeline carrying natural gas from Russia to Europe. And it was providing Europe cheap energy. Not only that, it was bringing Germany and Russia close together after 40 years of being estranged and having a world war or two between them. So it was great for diplomacy, and it was great for the economy. And the United States did not want that to happen. A lot of our NATO partners did not want that to happen, and they put a stop to it. Well, they didn't stop it. They slowed it down by blowing up their pipeline. But the pipeline was, oh, what was that? Is that a cat?
It's a cat.
I knew it.
Drop my lamp.
Oh, no. Your cat's a clown, man. He's the star of the show. I love it. My cats are staying out of the way tonight. He's just over there taking a nap. So where was I? Oh, the Trans-Siberian Pipeline. So
Right.
it's the playbook. And I don't know if I told you this or if you knew, but our current Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, wrote a book back when he was a college student. It was his college thesis about the Trans-Siberian Pipeline.
Really?
That book was called Ally versus Ally. Really interesting read in light of what happened to Nord Stream, because I believe that Blinken and Newland's fingerprints are all over that. He remembered the Trans-Siberian Pipeline, which is something that most people have forgotten. It was 40 years ago. Nobody was killed. It was this huge explosion, but it was out in the middle of nowhere in Siberia. So no one was actually hurt or killed when that pipeline blew up. But the strategic objective was the same. And that's what Blinken's book is about, is how the West and some of our partners in NATO were trying to stop the Soviet Union from being wealthy, from, making good money, selling natural gas to Western Europe who needed it, like Germany. We were trying to futz that whole thing up. And we did when we blew up their pipeline. So I'm just saying, guys, that we've done this before. It was 40 years ago. Most people don't know about it. I wrote a big, long Twitter thread about it recently. If you go to my Twitter, you can search Trans-Siberian Pipeline. You'll find all kinds of declassified documents that tell this whole crazy story. And it leads you right up to Antony Blinken's book, which was published in 1987. And it's very rare and hard to find now because it was a limited edition printing, but you can read it for free at the Internet Archive. And it's fascinating when you realize that you're looking at the blueprint for what they just did to Nord Stream last year. Now, how they did it, that's not my department. I think Seymour Hersh has a pretty good theory. I know why they did it. I don't know exactly how. I've got my own suspicions that I'm not ready to talk about yet or write about yet because I'm still working on it. I think Sai's theory is pretty close, but I also think he's being fed some garbage by his intelligence sources. Little garbage in, garbage out kind of thing.
Wow, you share the same opinion as Oliver Stone.
Is that right? I haven't seen your interview with Oliver. I must watch that.
I asked him at the end, about Nord Stream, and he said, well, Cy, I know Cy, and he's very good. The dark side of Camelot, I had my own guy on JFK, and Cy just had a lot of things wrong. JFK did not order the hit on Castro.
Right.
Oliver pretty much said the same thing, just with Cy, watch out where he gets his sources. If Cy Hersh happens to be watching this, don't think I don't like you. I like you. Come on the show.
I like you, Cy.
Yeah,
but we journalists, we kind of hack at each other sometimes. I question his sources.
Keep each other honest. Yeah. All right, Lori. Well, it's 11 o'clock. Where can people find you?
What a great conversation. Thanks for having me. You can find me on Twitter at Real Lori Spencer. I'm on Rumble. Just look for my name. And I'm sneaking back onto YouTube after they banned my other channel because I was talking about RFK Jr. and you're not supposed to do that on YouTube.
You didn't do the disclaimer though, right? That Jose did.
The ghost of Jose Vega.
No, we support the vaccine.
I forgot to do that. Darn. That's how they got me, man. That's how they got me. I forgot the disclaimer. So now I'm back on YouTube as Strange Fellows Podcast. That's the name of my podcast that we do Saturday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern, 8 to 10. And Scott Ritter, that was his idea, actually. Did I tell you he's back on Twitter?
Yeah, we know.
Did you know that? Yeah, Scott. They finally unbanned Scott Ritter for the 6th time today, and so he's back on Twitter for however long it lasts. Yay!
Okay, good.
See if that lasts 24 hours.
Let's see how long it goes for.
It'd be interesting to find out. Scott's going to push those boundaries, and you'll find out.
Okay,
that's why we love him.
Lori, we don't have a sign off, so normally what I do is I just keep talking.